Let's face it, revision isn't easy. It's generally not what you would choose to do. So that when you do put precious time aside for revision, it's really important that none of that time is wasted. In this video, I'm going to go through 5 types of revision, things you might do or think are good for revision, but in fact, they're much more likely to be a waste of your time. The first myth that we're going to put to bed straight away is the idea that you can do brilliantly without any revision. Some people think that some students are just so brilliant and so fantastic and so clever that they don't need to do any work and they will get that A star. And some students brag that that's exactly what they did, but I would suggest to you that probably some of those students did quite a lot of work. Is it possible to do brilliantly just by being clever? Well, the American psychologist Britton and Tester did some research on this and found that only about 4% of difference in grades is actually caused by intelligence. The rest of it is down to how well you prepare for the exam. So in other words, how well you do is down to you. You may feel quite confident in your ability. You might find school or college work quite straightforward, or you might really struggle with it and you may have low confidence. But the key point of that Britton and Tester research is that however you feel about how you're getting on and how clever you are, the results that you get are in your hands. And if you prepare, if you practice, if you do revision the right way, set it up well in advance, you can get massively better. It's down to you. You can get the grades you're looking for because the vast majority of achievement is down to your efforts, not any idea of how intelligent you might be. The second myth I'm going to question today is the idea that highlighting is a good way of revising. Now, I accept that highlighting feels good. I call it the comfort zone of revision. You've got nice pens, they're pink, they're yellow, maybe they're green. You've got long sets of notes, you're there burrowed away at your desk, highlighting huge amounts as you go along. It sort of feels good and it feels reassuring. But I'm afraid I've got bad news, which is that if revision feels easy, if it feels comforting, then it probably isn't very effective and you're probably not learning very much. Now, that's just not me saying that. Professor Dunlosky's research is pretty clear that highlighting can actually be unhelpful. The reason he thinks it's unhelpful is because it focuses concentration on individual bits of writing, individual bits of notes, so you tend to learn oddments as you go along rather than seeing the big picture or how information fits together. Now, I'm not saying never ever use highlighting. All you highlighting fans, don't entirely panic, because it can be useful. Maybe you can highlight key points and then turn them into flashcards. Suddenly the revision approach becomes more useful. But if you're just highlighting and not doing anything else, it really is a bit of a waste of time. The third myth I want to confront is that revision is all about memorizing. Now, don't get me wrong, memorizing material is really important. The body of knowledge of a subject is an incredibly important thing to know. All of those facts, all of those dates, all of those equations, all of those theories. Of course it's important, and of course most revision will involve some aspects of memorizing. The point I'm trying to emphasize here is that the memorizing is only one stage of revision. That is, in the end, you've got to use all of that stuff you know in an exam situation and to answer different types of question. Let's imagine you're building a house. Now, to build a house, you need bricks, wood, glass, tiles, a whole range of different materials. Imagine those are all of the facts and information you've got to learn. But you don't get a house from piles of all those materials. You've got to put them together in skillful, planned, coherent ways in order to get a decent house at the end of it. In fact, in order to get any sort of house at the end of it. And it's the same with all that knowledge in exams. Yes, you've got to know it, but when it comes to the exam, you've got to answer specific questions which will be specifically designed to test the way you can put that knowledge together. And in fact, the only questions that are likely to ask for recall of specific information are very low mark questions. The higher mark bands, the higher mark allocations are for questions and for higher level skills that ask you to put together the information, to analyse, to synthesise, to evaluate. That's where the marks are. The fourth myth I want to try and debunk is the idea that listening to music helps you revise. Stop. I know you like listening to music when you revise. Just hold on, listen to me for a minute or two. You may have heard of something called the Mozart effect. This is the idea that listening to certain kinds of music, in particular Mozart, sonatas in fact, helped people in an experiment learn in order to do better in certain types of IQ tests. So does the Mozart effect work for revision? What type of music should it be? Is it when you're doing maths is heavy metal? Or when you're doing history is hip hop? Does it have to be classical? Does it have to be Mozart? What's going on? Well, let me tell you about the research on this. Few psychologists today accept the Mozart effect. What they say appears to have happened in that piece of research is that students, by listening to music, their spirits were lifted, and this somehow sort of benefited their performance, but it wasn't the music that was directly helping them. So what is the research evidence on music and revision? A range of research was reviewed by Christopher not that long ago, in 2015 in fact, and his general conclusion was that listening to music had no positive effect. In every case, in every piece of research he looked at, students did better when learning in silence than they did with music playing. Now, I understand that lots of students like to listen to music while they're revising. So the first thing to say is it's not going to help particularly, but if you still want to listen to it, then it seems to be the case that it's better to listen to music with no lyrics because the lyrics can be distracting, so try to listen to instrumental music. If you want the music to benefit your learning, then maybe you're better off to play music before a revision session that is inspiring for you, that lifts your spirits. That sort of thing can raise your mood levels and therefore help you in the revision session to come. But if you think that listening to music, whether it be Justin Bieber or Snoop Dogg, is going to help you learn, then you're better off forgetting that idea. The final myth I want to talk about is the idea that rereading notes is the best way to revise. Okay, you've got textbooks, you've got your own notes, maybe you've got revision packs from your teachers, you've got a whole array of written materials. Surely a simple way of revising is to sit down and read through all of this material until it's somehow sunk into your brain. Over 60% of students take this approach to revision. The question is, does it work? The simple answer is yes, but there are some serious reservations about this method that suggests it shouldn't be your go-to approach for revision. Rereading is better at recalling big ideas rather than detail, and most exams need you to be on top of the detail. Secondly, where learning has taken place as a result of rereading, it tends to be about recall, so it's just about learning facts, learning information, and it doesn't help you apply or use that stuff you've learned in exams. But if you want to use rereading in your revision, and I said it does sort of work, then you're best leaving gaps between the rereading. So reread something, leave it a day, a few days, go back to it. In that way you get the benefits of what is known as spaced repetition, that is learning stuff over a period, which is more effective than learning it all in one go. But the main problem with rereading is simply that it's not the most effective method. It's beaten quite easily by other methods of revision that are much more likely to be effective and much more likely to get you into the grades that you want to get into. So there are 5 myths. 5 things lots of students believe, lots of students do, that are probably not always in their best interests. I want you to avoid those things, but most of all I want to wish you all the best of luck with your revision and your exams. We'll be dealing with the methods that do work in another video. See you there.